Hello and welcome to part 2 with Ashley Mortimer, and we're talking all things Fae right now. We got in the middle of a really engrossing part of the chat where we were talking about the difference between elementals and Fae. And as happens with these things, I've said before, pixies, gremlins in the works, whatever happened, and we've spent a little bit of time trying to get over that technological glitch. I'm not the most technological person in the world, but we've finally got there between us. So thanks for hanging on, Ashley, and coming back into this. And roughly, can you remember where we got to? Because we were getting really to the crux of the matter of the differences between Fae and Elemental.
Yeah, they didn't want us to discuss that, clearly.
No.
Yes, you were asking me about elementals, and so I was describing that elemental beings or elementals are a much more a lower order, is the phrase I used, of creature. They don't have the same sentient consciousness that we do, or at least we're not able to communicate with them on that same level. It's like the difference between a feeling and a voice. It's like the difference between being able to sort of understand. You know, when you go into a place and there's an atmosphere, but you can't really describe it, and it's not like there's something specifically telling you what it is. So it's a bit like that, as opposed to having a conversation with another human being who can speak your language. So the Fae are, I mean, it's a very broad term again, and it probably means different things to different people, but these are the creatures of folklore. These are personified individual creatures that have an individual nature and character. And we're talking again about non-physical beings, about beings that are their existence is not in the physical realm. They're a sort of disembodied spirit. We're not talking about dead people or ghosts. We're talking about creatures that have never had an incarnation, but who are individual. I think that's maybe the best way I can describe it. They have an individual personality and a character and a nature, as opposed to an elemental, which is a lot more homogeneous, of a kind of a shape, of a form of creature and being with a consciousness that's not so pinpoint. It's not so much in focus, and it's not able to communicate quite the same way. They tend to, and the occult tradition is that they tend to be associated with the 4 elements of the ancient world: earth, air, fire, and water. So you would have air elementals, earth elementals, and so on. So they're not the same thing, as opposed to a particular spirit that has an affinity for one of the elements. So you may find, I mean, just like human beings do, there are some people. For me, I said earlier, I like the natural world. I'm a lifelong angler. My grandfather taught me how to go fishing. I'm at home by water. I like water. I like the river. Now, maybe that's, I'm an air sign, I'm an Aquarian, but obviously the Aquarius is the water bearer as well. There's all sorts of things that may connect me to that. But there's a difference between, I wouldn't call myself a creature of water. I'm just an individual person who likes that. So I suppose if I became deceased, if I died and my spirit remained in the earthly realm, then you'd probably find me by water somewhere, fishing.
Talking about that, not pipe fishing, but talking about rolling off the mortal coil. So I've recently been having chats with people about reincarnating, and the theories about reincarnating into those kind of realms, into the realm of the Fae. Is that something that you've come across or thought about?
Yeah, very much so. And it's very prevalent. The notion of reincarnation is very prevalent amongst witches, and the Wicca as well. Most witches would probably most. I'm going to use the word most. Witches would probably say that they believe in reincarnation, and that there is a tradition or a thing that there's that feeling of coming home when you start doing the rituals for the first time. You kind of there's a weird familiarity to it, and when people experience that, then everyone will say, you must have been a witch in a past life.
Definitely.
So that notion of, but obviously that buys into the idea of time as being entirely linear and that you had a previous incarnation. I mean, I think it's more complicated than that. And if you study something like, I'm going to call it Kabbalah, but strictly the Tree of Life and the 10 Sephirah and the 22 Paths are more, they're not pure Kabbalah. That's not really complete. I mean, Kabbalists will say, oh no, he's done what everyone does. He's made the classic mistake there. He's called it Kabbalah. But this idea that we live in, coexist in different realms. We have different aspects to our existence that is in these different realms. And the Kabbalistic Tree of Life interpretation of that is that there are 10 spheres, 10 bubbles of existence, 10 places, 10 times, 10 things that in which we can exist, and we coexist in all of them. It's just a question of where our consciousness is at any given moment.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and there's
so
also
yeah,
those.
I mean, I'm getting very technical occulty now, aren't
Yeah.
I?
No, not at all. And there's also within those 10 spheres, you've got all the pathways as well. So you can be existing in the travelling pathways, going up and down the tree as well,
Right.
can't you? So it does
Yes,
get
I mean, we
hugely
exist in,
complex.
yeah, I mean, at the bottom is the sphere of Malkut, which is the physical realm of manifestation, and right at the top is Keter, which is the divine realm, the area where everything defies description. If anybody's interested in this, I recommend a book by Lon Milo Duquette called the Chicken Kabbalah, which is a slightly humorous title, and it is quite a humorously written book. But Lon Milo Duquette is an excellent occultist who knows an awful lot of information which he can impart in this brilliant teaching way. And he's got a model that describes ascending the tree like a factory. He said it's a pyramid, and at the bottom is where there's a room full of furniture and all the physical stuff is there. But on the next floor, that's where all the guys who are designing it are. They're the ones who are working out how many bits of wood they need and how they'll be screwed together. And the people at IKEA who deliberately allow pixies to take 2-3 screws out and give you 2 extra ones of the bits you don't need. But then up above that are the people who are actually designing these things themselves. So the people who are going, let's make a chair that wobbles around and does this, and let's do, and then right at the top of that, there's something else. There's another level of inspiration that comes from beyond that. There's another level of his factory model. So that's what we're talking about in ascending the tree there. So I mean, yes, it's a witchcraft concept. It's a Wiccan concept. There is no part of us that's not of the gods. We are our own gods as well. But not like physically right here in this manifestation. This is these bodies in which we inhabit, these 3 dimensions of space and time and flesh, and all this concept of physical manifestation are vehicles for the spirit. I did make the joke about the ghost on the meat sack roller coaster having another ride every day.
Yeah.
But that's what we are. In fact, ghost is a great word. Ghost in the Lakota is a word that we would perhaps translate more. It'd be much more New Age to say that they talked about spirituality and about our spirit being. But in fact, Ngi is the word that just means ghost. We are a physical lump of flesh and chemicals animated by a ghost.
And in that terminology, we're kind of the weird ones, aren't we? With all these beings on sort of astral, different astral planes, and there being such a scope of beings within the astral world and interdimensional worlds. And then we're the weird ones that are, we're running around in this really kind of heavy clamped suit, which was somebody else had suggested that on one of my other talks, that we are really clamped down by these suits that we're wearing.
Yeah, I mean, my experience and the teaching of some of these beings that have never had an incarnation is that they can't wait to find out what it's like.
Oh dear.
And there's this. I've seen these kind of descriptions of them sitting there outside of physical reality. These kind of almost like, I'm trying to think what it would be like. It's like like computer hackers trying to get into your server. They're all sitting there, all trying to get in. They'd love to be incarnated. Those spirit beings, those creatures.
Why do you think that is? What is it? Do you think that I know it's a massive subject. What do you think it is about having a human experience that is so attractive to
well, not
a lot
necessarily
of these...
human, but physical at least.
Yeah.
Maybe, well, just the unknown, I guess. I mean, just the experience of that. It's why does anybody want to ride a roller coaster? So it's the same thing. There's ghosts queuing up to ride the meat sack roller coaster just because they want to see what the ride is like. What's it like?
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe it's part of their development. I mean, you can talk about these spiritual paths and religious ideas of a higher purpose, and our journey is, this existence is we're only temporarily here. I mean, that's a common trait amongst all religious people, really, or theists at least. The idea that there's more to it than just my being is not a series of electrical impulses whizzing through a lump of meat. There's something more to me than that, and that has an existence, if not independent of, certainly that extends beyond the lifetime of the vehicle that carries it.
Yeah, definitely.
So if I have that spirituality about me, that individuality, and I don't mean, you can scrape off the personality and everything, but there's still some essence that makes me who I am and you who you are. and we've chosen to do this. So maybe there's some part of our longer term great plan by the creator or the gods or whoever we want to call them. Hopefully not the pixies, but there's some part of that plan that says, you know, have a go on this trip for a bit.
Yeah, definitely. So do you think that we can then jump and become part of the Fae realm, or the Fae can then jump and have this experience, this material experience? Do you think that that's a possibility?
I think my honest answer to that is I haven't the faintest idea. It's a massively intriguing question.
Yeah.
You know, are we permanently, having had, you know, if time is linear, let's make that presumption, which is a big presumption. So let's say our existence ends, our body dies, the personality and the psyche slough off, and what's left is the spirit. What happens to that spirit? Can it then be, can it change its nature? Can it be, as you say, can it then become an elemental? Or can it, you know, what happens to the drop of water when it goes back into the ocean? Is it still a drop in there? You know, and that's the great, fascinating, intriguing question about how the universe works. So, you know, without a beer in front of me, I don't feel very qualified to try and answer that. But that's what maybe that's what we're all doing. Maybe, you know, maybe Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide is right, and that this is all some big experiment by the mice to find out what the answer is. And then, as anybody who's read the Hitchhiker's Guide will know, that having discovered what the answer is, which in the case of the Hitchhiker's Guide is 42, which is actually wrong. But
it's not the question.
I mean, his point is that having discovered the answer, now we've got to figure out what the question was.
Exactly. Yeah, I love that.
And then, even when you've got what the question is, what does it mean? Why do you want that? You know, what does that imbue to us? So perhaps this whole thing is a big journey of a spirit to discover that. So whether that spirit can jump in its nature to being you know, could you call existence of the spirit of a fae or a pixie or an elf or whatever you want to call it, a sylph, salamander, undine? Is that individual experience? You know, what is that? Is that an incarnation? Could you call that an incarnation? Can you be incarnated without flesh or not? And if so, or if not, and what would you know? That's another aspect of the journey. So what happens if you've been a human spirit and you then become another kind of spirit? Does that make you different to all those other spirits that are like that? You know, if you were a Forest fan and you went to a Derby match and suddenly put on a blue and God no, I mean, please don't try this at home, children, because being a Derby fan is a very bad idea. But you know what I mean? It's, you know, what is it something that's in you that changes or not? I don't know is the answer, because the only real subjective experience I've got is where I am now. And even within my incarnation as a human being on this earth, walking around as an Englishman that, you know, is unfortunately stuck with the trappings of this heavy lumbering suit, you know, within that I've only got a very limited perception of the wider part of my existence, but there's some bit of me that seems to think that or believe that or have an understanding of that or feel that or whatever you want to call those other senses. So I have a notion that there's something else going on apart from just being an animated lump of meat with some electricity in it. So maybe but beyond that, I don't know what happens, because until I can escape this, it's Einstein again, isn't it, really? It's that, and by observing something you have to be immersed in it, and while you're immersed in it you can't observe it objectively. It is, you know, and so because detection equipment, I mean, our detection equipment this is where you're getting into the paranormal realms. Our human detection equipment is very limited. You know, basic science, and I have to say that despite my beliefs about the occult and about spirituality and about all these other things, I'm essentially, to some extent, I'm a scientist. So, you know, even if, and I believe in science, you know, it's all very well contacting the Fae or doing Reiki on yourself, but, you know, if you've got a headache, take a paracetamol. Because they're 10p in the shop, and they probably won't do you any harm unless you start crushing them up and snorting them or doing something stupid, you know. I'm rambling a bit now, but what I'm trying to say is that the scientific explanation, for example, our sensory detection equipment sees this tiny range of colour and electromagnetic radiation, and we can't see microwaves or infrared rays and things, but we know that they're part of the same spectrum as visible light. It's just that these recepting stuff and the interpretation that goes on behind it and what that does and how that recalls memory and everything else, it's very limited. So I think spiritually we're quite limited while we're stuck in these bodies. So the point is A, do we think there's something else outside of that? Yes. How do we push our consciousness through what the occultists or the tree of life is, or the Kabbalists would call the veil of Paraketh. How do we elevate up out of this sphere of Malkut and push our consciousness? And more to the point, having done so, when we come back here, can we remember our experience?
Yeah,
what was it like?
Definitely. I've had a,
you know, and these are all questions that occultists and religious people have been trying to answer for centuries, and spiritualists and spiritually aware people want to answer. We want answers. We want to know what's going on.
We do. We definitely do. I mean, I recently had a conversation with a friend of mine about what's the purpose of life, and my answer was, what would you do with it if you knew? And it is that for me is that bigger question. If you knew what your purpose was, what would you do with it? Would you be doing things differently? And that is part of our experience on the planet is you know, asking those questions, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And I mean, as a witch, I would have to say, you know, more intriguingly, can you change your purpose once you know what it is? Do you have to obey that? Is that what we have to do? Or is that what we're doing? Are we kind of, I mean, those sort of 1960s movies with the gods in Olympus pushing chess pieces around and Odysseus. I mean, is that what we are? Are we little puppets that are we predestined and guided towards the life experiences we've had? You know, because if we are, there's going to be a bloody argument when I get out of this body, because someone's going to have to answer for, you know, the shit that I put up with.
The thing is, I do, I mean, we're going quite off tangent here, but I do believe that those gods pushing us around are ourselves. And we make that decision and that pact. So, you know, you've only got to be mad with yourself if these are the experiences that you've signed up for. I can see us all queuing up, you know, going, do you want this experience? You know, what things do you want to do while you're on Earth? A bit like going on a package holiday, and these are the things that you're signing up for. And that's how I like to see it. And I think,
well, let me tell you, I bet you the brochure is a lot more glossy than the reality.
Oh yes, definitely, it's got to be.
You know, because I mean, it has, isn't it? You know, you imagine that consciousness sitting there as whatever visual thing you want to do. But, you know, I'd love to be incarnated. Yeah, it's your turn soon. You know, we're going to beam you inside that incubation chamber that's going to be called your mother. And any minute now you'll be, oh, there you go, through the gates. Yeah. And you come out and you think, I can't wait, because I've learned all those things from my previous lives and I'm never going to do that again. And I'll be a lot wiser. I'm going to be an old soul. And the first thing that hits you is, oh shit, this is physicality. I can't breathe. I can't even breathe. I can't communicate. What can I do? You know, and then you start crying and your little face goes red, and then someone holds up the scissors and snips the cord. Before you know it, you're like, holy shit, now I'm hungry. What am I going to do now? Oh, there's the only way I'll cry a bit. And before you know it, you've kind of forgotten all of that spirituality, and you've gone back into this immersive world of, and that's how what's the word? How immersive it is to have these experiences. And that's the same when you can elevate your consciousness to those other realms. And I know I've made it sound comic, but that's really I mean, I do think comedy is kind of a big part of the universe and does play a role in the way. And it also helps in our understanding. You know, for me, definitely. Anyway, it's being able to be sort of amusing about things. So even though pixies are whimsical and, you know, all gods are kind of playing a wicked trick on us all the time, all that comedy of that is just an aid memoir to help us remember to understand who we really are and what we are. Because if there is a purpose, then it's probably to further our own understanding of that, and probably have a good time while we're doing it. Definitely. You know, it doesn't make me a hedonist to say that I think life is a journey of, you know, it's one of the exercises. What is the purpose? Why are you doing that? Why are you a witch? Well, I want to know more about myself. Why? What is it you want? And ultimately, it comes down to, I want to be happier.
Yeah, definitely. And I think in terms of, you know, deities and in terms of the fae, they're very attracted to people who have that kind of humorous nature as well. They you know, you get that lighter side of those worlds sort of being attracted to you and helping you out and helping you sort of move forward with your life's quest. So, you know,
I mean, there's such a thing as dark humor, and a lot of the people who I've met in my life, who I think are the people whose opinions I respect and who I think you're pretty wise. They all tend to, one of the traits they seem to have is quite a dark sense of humor and so on. And certainly my dealings with those creatures of those other beings, the fae, as we're calling them for the purposes of this, you know, there is that sort of tricksy, dark sense of humor. There's something, and you learn a great lesson, you know. I don't know. No, I won't use that as an example. I was going to actually, I'll tell you what it was. What came to mind was a conversation I had on a BBC TV show where I met this very, very strongly fundamentalist Christian who believed that the Bible and everything in Christianity was literally true. And I said to him, I want to ask you something, you know, do you think Jesus was good at telling jokes? And he thought I was being, you know, supercilious with him. And I wasn't. I said, you know, it's because he gave the parables, and he gave his disciples these stories of things that happened in order to illustrate a point. The parables are, they're there to illustrate something, just like a joke does, right?
Mm-hmm.
And do you really think a guy, even if he was half God, walking through the desert with 12 of his mates, wasn't able to tell a joke when one of them tripped over or walked into a tree? Do you know, it was part of your humanity is to find humor and laugh in those things, and laugh at your own adversity and stuff. And I said, because when he told them the parables, he expected them to understand the meaning and follow the nuance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, yeah. I said, no, none of the disciples thought that there really was an injured man on the road and a Samaritan walked by, did they? And he went, yes. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. That was a true story that Jesus just recalled. And I thought, mate, you're crazy. And you think I'm the weirdo, And I'm not trying to have a go at Christianity there. I'm just trying to say that our perception of these things, so that nuanced idea of being able to see things and understand them in a different way. Yeah, we are quite complex beings and quite complex creatures, and we do have a complex life. Quite a lot of it probably just sloughs off and doesn't really matter when we're dead.
Mm-hmm. So I had a very similar conversation with a comedian who was having interactions with what she thought was an imp, or that kind of ilk of being.
Right.
When she stopped writing her sketches to go on stage, this imp would play up. And we chatted about why that was, and the kind of concept that it really thrived off her sense of humour, because it was quite a dark pixie-esque sense of humour. And when she stopped writing, it would bother her in the night, and it would wake her up by actually pinching her, which was quite bad. But when she was writing, it would sort of, its antics would disappear. It's so it is very important.
I mean, because I'm not just Wiccan. That's not the only thing I've studied or been interested in or involved in. And for a while, I carried this more indigenous picture of something let's nebulously call them the energies.
Mm-hmm.
And that they were all these kind of little faces, a bit like the scene in the Lord of the Rings where the goblins come out and they're all teeming down the pillars and things. And there's these spiritual beings, call them the pixies or whatever, but the energies, and they're all laughing. And for a while, a lot of the things I found that I was doing in my life, when they laughed, I was on the right track. And laughter was that kind of, how we kind of always look skyward or heavenward and say, help me out here. Am I doing the right thing? Is this the right thing? And then I get this kind of, and I think, did I actually hear that or not? And when you tune in, I mean, this is what people will tell you, and this is the same with all sorts of science. You can have receptive equipment like a radio receiver, but you have to tune it in.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to tune out all the other gubbins and garbage. And that's been part of the occult journey, really, for me, has been part of that, learning to do those things with my own, play on my own psychology, to stifle the monkey mind, to close down the senses and open up, the third eye, and develop my sense of understanding into those other realms. So, these are techniques that can be taught and techniques that you can learn. And, so to visualize something like that was actually quite helpful.
Yeah.
It was quite helpful to be able to visualize all these little faces talking to me. But did I really hear a voice? I mean, did something move an air molecule that moved my inner ear that then translate? I don't really know, and it doesn't really matter. And they're laughing now. Right now, I know I sound crazy, but right now I can hear, in my mind's ear, I can hear, that idiot. What's he thinking now?
Yeah.
What's he want to go and think that for? We'll get switched off. We'll get David.
I know we will.
I know.
Off. We'll get shut down by them. Do you think?
No, wait. I can defend us from that. Actually, possibly.
Bring him on. Go on.
But so yeah, there's an important piece of PPE here, and this is a device that's been fashioned from a witch's emblem, and this is, of course, a very important piece of PPE. This is personal protection from elves, and defends us and helps to block out the wicked radiation that these pixies are encouraging into our consciousness and abusing our lives with.
And this is going to stop us from being interfered with by the pixies this evening, definitely. I can definitely see that.
Madam, I can assure you that I have never been interfered with.
Talking about interfered by a pixie, personal experience-wise, what stands out for you in the world of Fae? Have you had any direct contact? What kind of experiences, other than the giggling, have you had direct experiences with them?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm many times over. I mean, I think the purpose of of religious and spiritual ritual is to elevate our consciousness. But once we're able to do, I mean, you start off by clearing yourself down, by cottoning onto yourself and figuring out what your true nature is. Then you can start looking up and pushing that consciousness outwards. And when you do that, you start encountering other consciousnesses that are either indigenous or native to those realms or spheres or whatever you want to call them, or whether they're other people like us, like popping our heads up above the clouds. And I've had numerous, I'm going to call them encounters. You know, I have seen a few things. I mean, I think if you walk around this planet for more than 20 or 30 years, something really, really, really odd is going to happen that you can't explain away with science or rationality. And, you know, and if you start fiddling with things like witchcraft or magic or the occult, or putting yourself in that position for this stuff to happen, then you're going to have more and more experiences. I mean, one that stands out, and it's going to sound an odd one, but one that stands out is a friend of mine. We were talking about pagan stuff, and they wanted to start a pagan group, and Sarah and I went over to see them, and we were hanging out, and then he said, it's getting to late in the evening. He said, "Do you want to go and see the UFOs?" I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Do you want to go and see the UFOs? My father owns a piece of land, and there's a hill. And if we climb the hill, quite often at this time of year, it was summertime, so we can see, you know, weird things happen. I'll show you, come on." So we all trudged up this hill. No one was drunk, by the way. No one had been drinking or anything. It was kind of odd. And we sat at the top of this hill. It's towards Mansfield and Newark and that direction, just for what it's worth. And these lights appeared over the horizon. And it was the most bizarre lights in the sky that I thought it's an airplane. It's obviously an airplane. But you know how an airplane light kind of just moves? Yeah. These things didn't. They went like that, and then it went like that, and then it moved like that, and then it came back again. And then there were 3 of them, and then 4. And it was just the sort of thing that I mean, I'm sure that some of your viewers and listeners are UFO enthusiasts who are used to seeing hundreds of hours of startling footage of stuff. But you know what? I've seen those, and I've often thought, oh, that's got to be fake, or that's not really happened, has it? You know, there's an explanation. It's a mirage or a reflection of the boat in the sea, or something on the camera lens, or dust mote, all those things. And I'll always go for those physical, scientific, skeptic descriptions first. And I know that's a kind of a theme, but I could not mistake this. There was no possible way that could have been faked. It couldn't have been a tiny drone behind the hedge. There was clearly something big in the sky, half a mile away, that was doing something, and it was interacting with the other lights, and they were kind of greenish, and then there was a white one, and the way they moved, it couldn't possibly. I was watching it with my own eyes. You could not have faked that. I was not looking at it on a TV screen. All these thoughts went through my head, and we lay there on this hillside, all of us, 4 or 5 of us, with our mouths open. And I said, "Matt, you know what's?" And he said, "Oh, this has been happening for years. My father brought me up here when I was about 12. I'm in my 30s now, and you know, it's just something that happens at this time of year." He said, "I thought we might see them tonight." And it was the most startling, physical, undeniable experience. You know, I know everybody would love to capture a ghost on camera. I know all, you know, paranormal investigators would love to have that incontrovertible evidence. But it was right there in front of my eyes, and it lasted not just a few seconds. This is like 10 or 15 minutes of this going on, you know. And there wasn't any possible scientific explanation other than perhaps extraordinarily advanced military aircraft on maneuvers. But what the hell were they doing above the sky of Newark? You know, it wasn't like it was hundreds of miles away, or it wasn't a satellite. It was clearly half a mile away over the next hill. Yeah. And there was something big and physically bright in the sky that was moving around in a way that defied physics.
And there's nothing
like that. It couldn't have been any kind of light phenomenon or hallucinogen or anything else. 5 or 6 people saw it all at the same time. It was the most So what that was. And then he said, sometimes you can talk to them. Okay. And we kind of he said, let's project to get one of them to come. Which way should we go? Left or right? Well, let's go to the left. And they all moved to the left. And it was like we were communicating.
Sort of telepathically.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was just, we weren't being led or steered. And it was just the most startling thing. And then we all went back home and had a cup of tea. And And I said to Sarah, did that really happen? You know, I'm now questioning whether that even happened, you know. And she said, no, it was dead on. She said, I was just the most amazing experience. And to bring it into that physical reality of that, you know, I mean, I've had
it's chicken and the egg,
visions and
though.
journeys and
with these kind of things, it's chicken and egg scenario where you wonder whether, because you're opening yourself up, that you become almost a beacon to attract these things happening, or is it just because you are opening up that you are more susceptible to these encounters? It's which is it really, you know? Because people who perhaps don't go down the line of exploring the spirituality, or are quite closed down to the concepts of the esoteric, that they don't seem to have the same experiences as those people who are much more open, and it begs the question that,
well, the guy's girlfriend who doesn't believe in any of that stuff, she was the same as the rest of us. We were all there and we all saw it. We all had this experience. And you're right, because you can bring stuff on. I mean, I was asked this question in a fairly serious witchcraft forum. People were talking about the use of drugs and narcotics in ritual magic, and it's a controversial subject, of course. And my point is that if your receptive senses are interfered with, how can you be sure of what sort of experience you've had? Will you remember it right? You know, I mean, people go out, two people can go out on a night out, one drinks and one doesn't. And the person who drinks might well come back saying, oh, it was great. We were dancing on the tables. It was a wonderful. And the person who wasn't might be saying, yeah, it was all right, but almost drunken idiots around me. And you've both experienced the same thing, but you've got a different perception of it. And I mean, I've been able, through the techniques that I've learned and through the ritual magic and the various other bits, that I'm able, I don't need that. I can have an experience that's as wacky and crazy as any kind of, you know, hallucinogenic trip without having to do that. And I can come back knowing that I can't really, you know, that must have been something going on. That must have been something magical and spiritual and it's unfathomable. So I haven't had to interfere with my own receptors. And so if you're open to stuff, it's also a kind of a danger that you'll get carried away.
Yeah.
You know, you go out, I'm not supposed to say this in the paranormal community, ghost hunting, am I?
You can use ghost hunting.
Right?
Yeah, you can. It's kind of tit for tat for me, you know, ghost hunter, paranormal investigator, doesn't really matter.
All right. Okay, but I mean, you go out looking for paranormal phenomena, and you know, you would think that people who do that are more likely to experience it because you're on the lookout for it. You know, I was trying to think. It's a bit of a crass example, but if somebody close to you dies, you suddenly start noticing how many other people in your group of friends have been bereaved recently.
Yeah, definitely.
Because it's in the forefront, you know. I mean, as you know, that very starkly happened to me. And I started to think there's something going on because everyone seems to be dying.
Yeah.
But that's only because you're focused in on that. And everybody you talk to is the central point of your own life and your own thoughts. So everybody else kind of wants to show their empathy and they go, oh yeah, my granny's just passed away, or my auntie or my next door neighbours, they're going to a funeral tomorrow. And before you know it, you've convinced yourself. But statistically speaking, if you take your group of 200 friends, there's a statistic as to how many of them, particularly if they're older, if they're the same age as me, you know, into my mid 30s now. If you're, you know, you're going to know more people, and there will be so many people who are basically coming to the end of their life or whose lives are ending at the time. But it's a question of whether you notice it. So again, there's coincidence, and there's that the statistical analysis of that. If you're on the lookout for something, then you're statistically more likely to notice it, aren't you? And,
it's basic psychology, isn't it? It is that basic psychology.
I mean, do you know what I read? I read Derren Brown's one of his books, and he gave this brilliant explanation about how he performs what he calls tricks. Because he says, doesn't he? He says that any phenomenon that anybody else can experience or show him or demonstrate, he will recreate it in a fake kind of way. And I mean, he is brilliant at what he does. But he said, look, a lot of it is psychology, and his example was playing the lottery. Was the balls coming out randomly. And he said, let's just imagine that there are 16 million combinations for those 6 balls, and 16 million people have all bought a ticket. So, you know, and he said, so if you're the bloke who sat there with the winning ticket when it comes out, You cannot believe the coincidence and luck. Can you believe it? 1 in 16 million chance, and I've won the lottery. I've won 1 in 16 millions. Come up. That's amazing. There's something going on here. That can't just be pure maths or whatever. And he said, but the trick is, now put yourself in the mindset of the guy who's pulling the numbers out. Because from his perspective, looking out at 16 million people in the audience, he knows that it's absolutely certain. It's absolute certainty that someone's going to win.
Yeah.
So to him, just because it's that bloke there or that bloke there, there's no, that he's not at all surprised because he knows someone's going to win.
Mm-hmm.
And so what Darren Brown's kind of punchline there was, he said, so all I've got to do as a marvelous magician is to make sure I've put the audience into the mindset and psychology of the guy who's holding the winning ticket. And I'm the guy who's drawing the balls out. So I know that there's an inevitable consequence of this series of actions, but all I've got to do is get the audience to put themselves into his mindset. Because if the guy who's won actually thinks about it, right, and gets his head round it, he won't see it as anything more extraordinary that he's won any more than the next bloke. Yeah.
Definitely. I do like Darren Brown. He's one of the very few. I get very frustrated with magicians. It's one of my bugbears. Don't like them. But Darren Brown, and one of the things that watching him very early on, and again, we're going off tack, but that's fine, was that he came out after the first series about saying that he'd used subtle mind control tricks to make people fancy him on screen. And I just thought, I like you even more now, because he'd admitted it. He'd admitted that he was using this glamour, this kind of magician psychology. Yes. Yeah, definitely. To kind of woo people into his world. And I just thought, that's just genius. It's absolutely, because he was very conscious of it as well. And that's
certainly true that stage hypnotists and stage hypnotism, it's not quite the same thing as helping people to develop a state of hypnotic consciousness. But the stage hypnosis is all about that. It's all about charisma and gaining the trust of the audience and then basically controlling people's actions. And there are techniques for doing this. Psychology is brilliantly interesting and it works. Now combine that with the natural magic of how the world works, and suddenly you've got somebody who is a powerful magician, or could pass themselves off as a witch.
Yeah, definitely. We've got off track a bit. I just want to get back on track. Just want to briefly chat with you about your role in Help My House is Haunted. Kind of a bit of a backstory about how you got involved in that, and what was that about? What's your role in that? And talking a little bit about Witch's Wood as well, and tell us a bit about that. So, how did that happen? How did you get contacted by the show?
So I was friends with somebody called. Can I mention names? Is it okay to mention names?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was friends with Jane Harris. Jane and I had worked. She'd asked me to do some consulting work on a documentary that she was making that involved a witchcraft criminal case that was allegedly had witchcraft involved. And I did my usual wet blanket act and said, no, that's nonsense. There's nothing witchy there. But we got. And then she rang me up and she said, you'd be a great guest on the show, and we're coming to film in your area. And I said, oh, that's great. Whereabouts? She went, oh, Witch's Woods. You can tell us all about Witch's Woods. And I thought, I don't know why Witch's Woods is. I mean, when we were kids, we called that particular area, we called it Fox Hills and Fox's Wood. So I did the usual due diligence and Googled it. And I said to her, look, I'm being really honest with you. I'm not sure I can add very much to your investigation. What they wanted to do was investigate various aspects of this village, including an outdoor nighttime investigation of the woods, where they wanted to see if they could contact natural spirits. So they got me on to deal with, to do that. So I said I'd do it. And I said, look, I'm not going to be a wet blanket, but I'm not going to play up to the cameras either. I'm going to tell you what I think. And if you present me with some evidence, whatever it is, I'll do what I can to describe that. But I'm not going to pretend that I'm, I'm the kind of the leading witch of Witch's Woods, and because I've never heard of Witch's Woods and I've never been here. But when we walked into the place to do the filming, I was at home. I'd come home. I felt exactly where I needed to be, and it was on my doorstep, almost literally on the doorstep. It was the most bizarre thing. But I'm going to tell you something else now that I haven't said before. So they said we're going to meet in the pub car park, because they did the investigation from a pub called the Admiral Rodney in Calverton. And I haven't been there for years. And it's funny enough, I was saying to somebody, I'm going to do this TV show. They're filming in a couple of weeks. It's going to be good fun and blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
They said, oh, you know, you do a bit of that, don't you? And, you know, I'm known to go and investigate, I think, but to go and help people who are having trouble with what they think might be disturbances in their house. And I've got quite a good track record for fixing it, or fixing them, basically getting them to sit in the Darren Brown mindset, not the audience member mindset. Anyway, this lady rang up. She was most distressed, and she thought that she'd got. Oh, that's right. I said I haven't done an investigation case for quite a while, and sure enough, the next day, out the blue, comes an email followed by a phone call. And she said, you know, I've just had this feeling that I needed to, you know, to reach out. And as I've thought that, the last few days have been terrible, and I'm having all these phenomena, and I'm very embarrassed. And my children and I have moved out of our house. And I said, well, you know, whatever's going on, the fact that you've felt the need to move out of your house because of this dreadful, you know, whether there's a ghost or a spirit or a demon or whatever it is, if it's caused you to disrupt your own life, then let me see what I can do to help. So she said, well, let's meet up. So I said, okay, well, here's the rules, public safety and everything, you know, let's meet in a public place. You're a stranger to me and I'm a stranger to you. So, you know, let's just do the sensible thing. We'll meet in a public, where are you? And she said, I'm staying at my sister's house. I said, okay. She said, I'll just ask her what the nearest pub is. And I mean, it could have been anywhere in Nottinghamshire. And she said, oh, I'm in Calverton, and we're right next door to the Admiral Rodney. So I was planning to go to the Admiral Rodney to film this thing for Help My House is Haunted in a week's time. And I haven't been in the Admiral Rodney or had it come into my consciousness for 20 years, 30 years or whatever. I grew up in the next door village. And then suddenly, just in this weird coincidence that was also related to spirituality, magic, witchcraft and so on, I found myself sitting in the Admiral Rodney talking to somebody, a stranger I'd never met, about how her house was haunted. And thinking to myself, and I'm coming back in less than a few days' time to this very same pub to talk about Help My House is Haunted. Now, what are the odds of... And I thought to myself, you know, this theory I had where I said that once you zoomed in on something, you kind of notice it everywhere. But I thought it can't even be that, because the circumstances are so ridiculously unlikely that a haunted house and my input into that, which is relatively rare. I'm not doing investigations every day or every week or every month or every year even. So, you know, that's all come together in the very same building, all within the space of a few days. What?
Do you think
What's that about?
Do you think that's self-manifestation though, because it's on your mind, playing on your mind, that you're putting that out into the universe and it's building and it's going to give you it back? I mean, that specific it is mind-blowing, but we do that.
There had to be some reason. Well, I mean, there couldn't not be a reason. It just doesn't stand to logical analysis that's happening for anything other than a reason. But what that reason is or why, I don't know. But, you know, so what you're saying is you're talking about law of attraction kind of concept, of that idea that you fix something in mind. I'll share a little witchy thing that I've been teaching some of my witchy students. They wanted to, you see, what looks like magic, you haven't affected the world around you. All you've done is seen what the circumstances are and been really analytical and really good at spotting what's probably about to happen. And then kind of lining yourself up for it to happen. So do you know those little music boxes, the little things that go around on a cylinder, and they've got little knobs, little bits that stick up, and then there are a kind of, I don't know, tweaky little wire things that make a different note. So you can play a tune on it if you turn the box around. So I've said, well, look, think of life like that. And what we're doing as witches is we're trying to predict where the tune is going. So as the cylinder's coming round, here's the good thing that's going to happen to you, and here's the bad thing. They're coming towards you anyway. The question is do you stand this side or do you stand that side? And if you can see what the pattern is and spot the pattern, then you can stand in the way of all the good stuff. Now, everybody around you thinks that you're a brilliant witch because you've projected your intent to bend the world to your will. But in actual fact, all you've done is predicted what's probably going to happen and set yourself up to cope with the circumstances as best you can. So when all the lottery win or the good piece of news that's coming your way hits you, everyone thinks, oh, you've attracted that, but you haven't really. All you've done is stood in the way of it because it was coming anyway.
Definitely. I mean, going back to the Admiral, it's weird because the day that we met to go and you showed me up at Witch's Wood, there'd been a terrible.
I did not. I absolutely deny it. I certainly did not.
There was that terrible accident and it blocked both roads into that.
Oh, yes.
And we had to meet at the Admiral.
That's right. We got drawn back. Yes, you're right.
Yeah. And we took a photo
as well. That was That was a few weeks. Was that weeks or months later? Was that?
I think it was a couple of months. Yeah, after.
Couple of months.
Yeah. So
so you know what? Now you've said that. I mean, I'm literally. This hasn't been set up or anything. Just so your viewers know, I didn't know. I'd forgotten that you and I met like that, and we did that, didn't we? And,
yeah.
And it was almost as if suddenly back on the same subject again, and the Admiral Rodney's come into the frame for me anyway, from my perspective. So I've now been drawn to the Admiral Rodney 3 times on occult matters.
Yeah. Something's going to come out of that one. Definitely.
I won't go next time. Next time I won't go.
Just avoid it. I'm
not
going.
That was it. Well, we weren't planning to. That was the thing was that under none of those circumstances did I have any control over that. There was there was never my suggestion to go to the Admiral Rodney under any of those circumstances. And in the case of the day that we went for a walk up there, you know, there was no. We never even spoke about the Rodney really because there wasn't any reason to. It just. And yet, like you say, we found ourselves standing in the car park of the Admiral Rodney yet again, talking about witches, ghosts, and magic and paranormal. Yeah, isn't it bizarre?
Yeah, strange, very strange. I know that I've took up a huge amount of your time this evening, and we've had that kind of...
I know, vast, but you haven't. Don't worry, because time's infinite, you see.
It is.
Apparently time is not this finite lump that I've given you. Apparently it's infinite. And in an alternative universe, we've both been drinking ice-cold beers somewhere and doing something that's completely unrelated to interviews.
It sounds brilliant. That sounds brilliant. I just want to ask you, what future plans have you got? Where are you going to be talking? Where are you going to be? Have you got plans for a book? I think you should write a book.
If I did, it'll be the shortest book on witchcraft ever, because it'll be called You Don't Need All That Crap.
I think you should do it. I think you should do one of those little books. Like, you know, the little book of calm, have the little book of witchcraft.
The little book of witchcraft, yeah. Yeah, subtitled You Don't Need All That Crap.
Yeah.
My very, very wise, one of my mentors in the craft, she said, you know, there's 3, as you're possibly aware, there's 3 stages in your witchcraft journey, the 3 degrees of initiation. And she said, here's how it goes, right? Here's the chapter on the degrees of witchcraft, of Wicca. She said, 1st degree, oh, look at all this amazing, exciting stuff. All this stuff all my life that I was interested in. Seems quite simple now, I've understood it. 2nd degree is, oh no, wait, it's really occultly complex. And look at all these twisted rituals that you have to do and the deep hidden meanings of everything. And then she said, when you get to your 3rd degree and you elevate, so there you go, oh no, wait, it was easy after all.
Yeah.
And I think that might be how life is, because life as a baby seems really easy. You know, I want to eat, I want to sleep, I want to cuddle. And then as you get to be a bit to your middle years, it's kind of, oh my God, I've got to remember the car keys in the house and juggle my job, and I've got a wife and family and children. And then when you die afterwards, you go, oh yeah, I didn't need all that crap, because actually my existence is really simple after all.
Yeah, and definitely agree.
I wish I'd worked that out sooner, because then I would have had a happy time. So, yes, I'm going to write a book, but it isn't going to be about any of that, unfortunately. I think I'm going to work with a colleague of mine on some witchcraft history, and we're going to write a book about the Book of Shadows and about the Wiccan rituals as they were developed by Gerald, and we're going to do a kind of critique of that and pull together some information and some theories about how he came to get these rituals, because no one really seriously believes that they've been handed down for centuries secretly by witches. And just that's just another of those nonsenses that are perpetrated even within the craft. Yeah. So I think we're going to write a book of the 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 Book of Shadows.
You should so call it that.
Although I have just my publishing company is just publishing a book by Philip Heselton, which is it's called In Search of the New Forest Coven, and it's an investigation into the people who Gerald Gardner encountered and what their possible connections going further back could be. And Philip is Gerald Gardner's biographer and Doreen Valiente's biographer. Wow. He's a very, very, very good historian. And I've just published his book. So, I mean, I'll perhaps say to you for the first time that the plan is for Philip and I to write this book together.
Wow.
So we will do that. And having published his book, I'll probably be the publisher and the author, which means I'm going to have to sign a contract with myself and do myself out of a load of money, which would be great.
So what else have you got
so I'm
planned?
going to do that, and I'm going to carry on giving talks wherever. And you know, I've done quite a few of these paranormal flavoured shows and series and things and stations and channels. So I'm always happy to cross over and talk about things on whatever level, and I love doing the interaction. I love the different kind of questions that people want to ask about Wicca and witchcraft, and you know, we'll talk about anything. We'll talk about how it works or whatever. So whenever these opportunities arise, I do it. I don't kind of tout myself. I've never touted myself, but you know, the local radio and the local TV, if it's summer solstice, then I'm the kind of person that they ring up and go, will you come on the radio and tell us about it? And I come on and disappoint them by not taking my clothes off and jumping through a bonfire. That's it.
You only do that when you're playing the guitar.
Well, there's the guitar playing. Yeah, I'm going to do some gigs as well on Facebook Live, and that's been quite good. And yeah, my kind of music career, I went to America last year and I gave some talks and lectures and did some concerts. And I mean, they rang me up and said, do you want to come to America on tour? And I was like, I think you've got the wrong bloke, mate. You know, you need someone who, and they went, no, it's you. You're a drawer. You're an audience puller. And I'm like, well, trying to be humble as well. But at the same time, I just thought, you're going to lose your shirt if you're, going to fly me over there. And I came back with money in my pocket and stuff. And my music career, I bought a new guitar and it sounds better. And so I'm enjoying that aspect of life as well. So I'm going to do some more music too and play the pagan festivals and any other, been offered some other festivals to do. So I've got loads of, I've been keeping busy on lockdown, not just playing Agent McDonkey, but I've got loads of stuff going on. There's always something happening, and you know, life's like that. The roller coaster rolls, and whatever happens next will happen next. And mostly, I'm not, you know, I'm trying to roll. I'm a normal person in some respects. I've got a normal day job, and I go to work and I pay my bills and pay my taxes and stuff. But weird things happen to me. I'm just a normal person to whom lots of odd things have happened. So who knows what's next? Probably go back to America again, or
that'll be good.
Beamed up by aliens and probed, probably.
That's not so good.
Then I can write a book about that.
Yeah, that's not so good, being beamed up by aliens and probes. It's not.
Oh, isn't it?
No. Oh, well, it depends.
It's perceptions, isn't it? Maybe I fancy that. I don't know.
You've put it out in the universe now. Are you heading towards that side of the music box? If we don't see you again, Ashley, bless you. I think on that note, if the aliens do come down and take you away, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. Where can people find you?
You can look for Phoenix Flames, spelt F-E-N-I-X, is the name of the publishing company that my deceased girlfriend, who died suddenly, she started, and I've carried on. I've fulfilled some of the promises she made to some of the authors and done that. So Ashley, or if you type Ashley Witchcraft or Ashley Wicca into Google, some point there, you'll probably from the hat, you'll recognize me. And so you can always find me. And I'm around on Facebook as well. So, you know, don't be shy. Come and talk to me, or come and be talked at by me.
It's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you so much.
It's been fun, hasn't it?
Yeah, I'm sure we'll catch up again, because I'm sure there'll be loads of questions that will come out of this. I'm hoping there is lots of questions that will come out of this. So go and enjoy your evening. Go and get that beer. You've definitely earned it, and thank you so much.
Oh, bless you. Thank you for being there and having me and asking me all the right questions and things to make it easy for me to give them silly answers. It's been a pleasure, Kate.
Bless you. Thank you.